which we had examined. Therefore, it was disappointing and disconcerting to have all of that unravel so quickly.
We fought very strongly against strong Air Force support for this plan for about 9 months. And we told them in the beginning we weren't going to do it, and we didn't do it.
This program will achieve 3 objectives.
On October 2nd, 1981, President Reagan canceled the Carter basing plan. But an expert panel had been unable to come up with an alternative. There was only one option: put the MX back in the silos it was originally designed for.
We will complete the MX missile, which is much more powerful and accurate than our current Minuteman missiles. And we will deploy a limited number of the MX missiles in existing silos as soon as possible.
After 6 years of searching for a survivable basing mode, the MX was literally back where it began.
If there is or will be a window of vulnerability, why is the MX any less vulnerable if it's in silos, the location of which the Soviets presumably already know, unless we were going to launch on their attack?
I don't know, but maybe you haven't gotten into the area that I'm going to turn over to the Secretary of Defense.
Because the silos will be hardened.
Yes. I could say this. The plan also includes the hardening of silos so that they are protected against nuclear attack. Now, we know that is not permanent. We know that they can then improve their accuracy, their power, and their ability. But it will take them some time to do that, and they will have to devote an effort, a decided effort to doing that.
So this is a way then of buying time, sir?
In a way of narrowing that window of vulnerability.
The man who'd helped invent the window of vulnerability was disappointed.
The candidate who campaigned on the window of vulnerability not only did not proceed to close that window of vulnerability, but open it wider.
The deepest concern, of course, that the Air Force had was that in the absence of a basing mode, we felt that the Congress, or many thinking people, would simply not be in favor of the MX system at all.
Lou Allen's concern was well-founded. Congress, which had demanded 6 years earlier that the MX be survivable, had since paid little attention to the missile. But now, on Capitol Hill, even pro-defense senators like Henry Jackson began asking awkward questions.
This system is not survivable as proposed.
Senator, I don't think that at this point there is anything that you can guarantee is going to be perfect. And what we need to do is to get the added strength that we can get as quickly as we can, and meanwhile, start the search for something that is even better.
Congress reacted to silo basing as it had in 1976. It turned it down and ordered the administration to come up with something better by December 1982. And it was then, from out of the blue, that what seemed like the perfect basing mode suddenly materialized. The idea was to build super strong silos that would need almost a direct hit to destroy them. Then, instead of deliberately spacing them out, as in earlier basing schemes, the trick was to pack them very close together. This meant that incoming warheads would have to explode close together and would blow each other up before they could blow up the silos. When the attack was over, the surviving missiles would rise up through the debris and fire back. The idea, called dense pack, had the enormous attraction, compared to the Carter plan, of taking up a strip of land just 1 mile by 14.
So it had the advantage of seemingly pleasing everyone. It was survivable, it was clever, it was cheap, and it didn't take up much land. The only problem was that as near as we could tell, it might not work.
Unfortunately for the administration, a majority of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was also afraid dense pack might not work when the plan was presented to Congress.
3 recommended not proceeding with it at this time, with 1 making the qualification to say that if it was believed that it would help move the arms control negotiations, recommended going ahead with it.
It is not perfect, and we are not aware of any mode that is perfect.
The public's got the idea that it's a boondoggle, a Rube Goldberg.
The dense pack basing mode is in deep political trouble.
So deep was Dense Pack's political trouble that even a last-minute appeal by the president at a Senate Republican Christmas party could not sell the scheme to an increasingly skeptical Congress.
That we make. Now, I won't take this opportunity at a social gathering like this to twist your arms much. I'll just tell you now that we can look each other in the eye. The MX system is needed.
But needed for what? A House-Senate conference confirmed Congress's opinion that the MX was for deterrence and must be survivable, and again refused funding unless it was. 1982 ended with the MX all but dead. 1983 began with a mood of deep frustration at the White House. There had to be some place to put the MX that Congress would buy, but the legislation gave the administration only 3 months to find it. In desperation, the White House established a bipartisan commission, defense experts from both parties.
Give you some action in this, rather than waiting. I will sign the executive order which creates this commission.
It was headed by retired General Brent Scowcroft.
We're official.
My notion was that the task was to find a decent burial for the MX, because I was dubious that a solution to the problem could be found. But then gradually, as we got into it, it didn't look quite so hopeless.
The commission may have been bipartisan, but its members all agreed the MX should be built, if only to end the long years of wrangling. As to how it should be based, tests of the launch system were going well, and there just seemed no alternative to putting the missile in the silos it had been designed for. So the task now was to justify silo basing after years of arguments that it would be destabilizing. Commission witness Al Carnesale.
We have so many weapons of so many different kinds deployed in so many ways that the notion that the Soviets would launch a first strike because they could get some tiny fraction of them, namely these MXs, is silly. We were talking about deploying, imagine 100 MXs. That would be 1,000 nuclear warheads. The United States has about 12,000 nuclear warheads directed at the Soviet Union. If they could get that 1,000 that are in the MX silos, they still have another 11,000. They're going to be headed at the Soviet Union. We only have about 20% of our nuclear warheads in our land-based ICBM force. The rest are on bombers, and cruise missiles, and at sea. And those are the long-range weapons that can reach the Soviet Union. So these people had the argument right in that it does undermine stability by putting MXs in silos, but by very, very little in a scenario that's very unrealistic.
But if the scenario is unrealistic today, the Commission saw some danger of its materializing tomorrow, once Soviet submarines get accurate missiles. With only a 15-minute flight time, sub-launched missiles could conceivably catch both the U.S. bomber force and its ICBMs in a lightning first strike, leaving the entire burden of deterrence on the U.S. submarine force. To hedge against this prospect, the Commission recommended developing a new missile, truly mobile this time, small enough to be carried continuously around military reservations on its own launcher. With only 1 or 2 warheads, the so-called Midget Man would be both harder to hit and much less valuable a target than the bigger silo-based MX. The final Scowcroft recommendations were: build 100 MX missiles, not enough themselves to pose a first strike threat, and put them in silos. Develop the Midget Man, and, through arms control, try to achieve a more stable balance of forces with the Soviet Union. There was something for everyone.
We got, in a political sense, people who supported the MX would accept the small missile as a way to get the MX. People who didn't like the MX but liked the small missile but would accept the MX because of the small missile. And people who perhaps didn't feel any modernization was necessary, but in order to get the Reagan administration active in arms control, would support a strategic modernization.